Right, already. Hello. Hiya Ken, hiya Brian. Yeah, it's been a mixture on it. It's been a mixture. Starts off alright. Never mind. Never mind. We're just going to get used to it. Right, so we are going to paint the tiger. Paint the tiger. I think that's a song in it, Paint the Tiger. Something like that. Right. So what we normally would do with it, well, this is what we did last week. And as you can see, I've just drawn some faint outline around where I want the mount, where I want the colour to end, because I'm going to crop that afterwards, so I'll explain as we go along. So normally when we're doing a pen and ink, in some cases we just put weak washes through it and leave it at that, but in this case we need some colour fetched out in this tiger, so we need some texture and fur fetched out, because the pen and inks just won't do it justice, because you've got too much white. We need colour in so that the whites stand out. So we're going to build it up and get some eye detail in, and the last thing we'll do really is put the background wash in and shape the tiger. And sorry, that's not the last, because we've got whiskers. Where's the picture at? So we've got whiskers here, and also some odd fine hairs. So we'll use a bit of, I've got some acrylic gouache, so we'll use some gouache to put the whiskers in. If you've got a pen, an acrylic white pen, use that, but I can never get away with them. I've tried them and they always block up. What we also need to do is when we paint in the background, we need to leave these bits of white. Wait a second, I'm just going to point instead of that. We need to get these bits of white. These need to be left round here, and the bits of white in there areas, so you get that feeling of sunlight. So that's what we sort of working on really. So we'll get going, and what I'm going to do is wash in to the background of the tiger, this part first, because there's some paler areas just around it, and you want to get that effect of sun hitting in places and shadows hitting it in places. So we're going to do a weak wash first, and then just drop some stronger colours in, and while they're drying, then we'll put some greys into the legs, into the tail, and get them built up. And then we'll come forward and do the real detail into the head and get that built up. So I've also got some acrylic, Liquitex acrylic gouache to put in to get some whiskers afterwards. You can actually scratch them if you wanted to. If you've got a reasonable blade, you can just flick them in, but we'll see what gives. Sometimes it depends on how much the acrylic goes on. Right, all right then, I'm talking around, so we get started. So I've got a reasonable size brush here. You want something that's just going to cover this sort of shape in first, and then gradually drop more colour in. So we're sort of going round here, down this side here to where the white of the leg starts, and round here, and then we'll add more yellow in. So I'm saying yellow, it is yellow really. The colours I've got these are Gallo watercolours, French colours, so I'm going to be using the yellow and the yellow ochres from them. I've also got my usual palette for the darker colours. That's my usual clean palette for the darker colours in the background afterwards. And just in case, I've got these new ones by Winsor & Newton that's sort of supposed to be back to the Masters type style, I don't know. So I've got plenty of colours kicking around, so let's get started. I'm going to use the cadmium, this yellow, like this. This is the French. Stop it rattling a bit. Keep it watery at this stage. Keep it fairly wet. I need to stop that rattling. And fire. I'll use some artist's tissue. That'll stop it. Right. Yeah, that's better. So get the yellow. Get some of the ochre as well. So it's yellow ochre. It's quite orangey, that one. This is a French one. It's quite orangey. Just if you're doing it, you just want some cadmium yellow, a little bit of yellow ochre, but keep this wet for the moment. Just keep it fairly wet, like that. Very well. If you want, if you've done like I've done and just drawn an outline, you can test it on the outside edge. Just test the sort of sense of it. So I'm going to put this wash in and then drop a bit of water in this area where I want it lighter. So round the body, getting that shape in. Round the top, just sort of float the colour in. You will have made sure that you did use waterproof inks, didn't you? You will have made sure of that. Now leave that area alone for a second and just come round the outside edge of the body. Fetch this over like this to about here and down this sort of front area here, and then just sort of tease it out down there. Fetch it round the back there like that, into there, and fetch it down just to the sort of the back of the leg and sort of tease it in. Now that's lighter, so just get a bit of water and just wet into that with just some clean water and blend it in to the colour you've just done. So it's picking up. I'm going to zoom in for you. I don't want to go too far in. I'm going to zoom in so that you can get a better idea of the tiger. There you go. So you're getting that into there like that. Now what I would do now is to drop a bit more brighter yellow, add a bit more brighter yellow into the mix, like that. And drop that in round here, round that outside edge like that, just dropping it in, fetching it round the baseline like that, and then drop it in just over the top. Leave it lighter back there, just at the front, drop it in over the top. Leave it lighter there, and add a little bit of yellow ochre, but stronger yellow ochre. I've got some stronger yellow ochre there, just a little bit more browner, and just drop that in. It's got to be done while it's all wet. Just drop that in. So you want, what you want is a sort of a burnt sienna mixed with a bit of yellow ochre, and you're dropping that in to create this shadow into the muscle just here. Can you see? Just through there like that. So you're just darkening that down. Yellow ochre, burnt sienna will sort of do it. Just drop a bit more in while it's still wet. So you're just creating that little sense of getting the haunches just in there and getting that muscle sort of into the shadow a bit. And do the same just round the back of the leg as it's going back in on itself like that. Into there like that. A few little drops, just where you wet it, just do a few little drops with your brush, just where the dark lines are, so it just teases out a little bit. Just into there like that. And then, to make it even stronger still, get a little bit more yellow, just a bit yellow by itself, and drop that in on that back side. Can you see it's sort of getting that sunshiny feel just round there? So it's all wet, it's all watery and running in. So just drop some of that. This is yellow, just a nice watery yellow, just dropped into there like that. Now I'm going to let this dry at the top before I go into here. So what I'm going to do is do the legs. I'm going to do the legs and get the legs in. And I'm going to use a grey for that, coming down here, so and the tail. So I've got a slightly smaller brush. What you want really is, I'll tell you what I would use. I would use some French ultramarine. I'll mix it just down here where that brown is. So some French ultramarine. You could use Payne's Grey if you want, but it might just be a bit too strong. French ultramarine and burnt sienna. And these two colours will give you a hello, Alison. Couldn't comment at first. Yeah, it's sometimes. I mean, I know there's lots of people watch, and for some reason YouTube allows some people to comment and some can't, and I don't know what it is. We've gone over this before. It's something to do with you have to have a Google membership, but I know most of you have, but I don't know why some people can comment, some can't. But I get lots of messages afterwards saying I was watching but I couldn't comment. Anyway, get yourself this grey. This is blue with a little bit of burnt sienna in, and it's just sort of a watery. Keep it on the bluer side and keep it watery. Come down the tail. I would just steer clear of the yellow for a second or two. Just come down the outside edges. Paint it into the black, because we made the black, if you remember, with like holes in it, so that you could get just a sense of grey into that, so it wasn't all just a solid black line. Paint that. I will touch that into there when that's dry. Take it round the back of the tail. If by any chance you see paint dropping all over the place, that's just a normal position for me. And take the tail sort of out. You know, you're gonna crop it into there like that. So just drop that in, drag it into the darker patches there, so it carries on through. And then just get a little bit darker, just add a little bit more strength to it, a bit more French ultramarine, a touch of burnt sienna, just a little bit stronger. I'm just going to go up to there, but I'm still going to steer clear because that yellow's still wet. I'm just making this a little fraction darker on the far side, on the left side. Just touching it into the back end like that. So we get sunlight catching this ending. And at the moment it doesn't stand out, but when you put the background wash in, that'll stand out like that. And you can do the odd flick with just a little flick of a brush, just to suggest some looser hairs here and there, like that. Right, so come underneath here with the same colouring. So you're coming underneath that white there, down to this leg here. Darken that down. Now, what I would do is just flick it out here and there to suggest hairs. Just flick it out. I'll zoom in a bit closer. I can get a bit closer for you while we're doing this. That's as close as I can get. So flick it outwards to suggest a few hairs, like looser shadow here and there, like that. Just little flicks into the dark parts there, leaving just a little suggestion of hairs looser. There's some shadow on down there, but you don't need to worry about that. That's we aren't putting any plants in. And then down here, fill it into the dark, the ink that you've done. Fill it in the ink, flick it up, get a sort of an angle to look as though that it's cast. There's a shadow being cast onto its leg, just there. And again, you can just do the odd little flick, just to break some of the hairs up here and there. Come down through here, run a little bit of grey into the white there. It doesn't matter if it blends in up there, like that. Fetch it down the outside edge. And as you're getting into the dark, just run into the dark, so you tone down the whites that you've left. Bonsoir, bonsoir. Do, how are you doing in France? I bet it's nicer than in here. We've had nothing but rain for days. Nothing but rain. Right, carry on down here. And all you're doing is just flicking in, like suggestion of fine hairs. Just little little touches like that, so you're just breaking up the texture into there, keeping it fully on through here and into them dark patches there. So fetching it through there like that. Now as you're getting down here, you're going to go at an angle to suggest the light. So just start creating tufts by just flicking a little bit and leaving little fractions of white showing through the dark patch. And if you notice on the photograph, it sort of angles through a shadow coming down here like this, and sort of just going behind the paw like that. And again, you can just flick the odd tuft out here and there. Keep that sort of shadow going, but just the odd tuft out. Now, just slightly, you can add a touch of Payne's Grey if you want. I'm just getting a separate Payne's Grey, and I'm just going to drop it in on the sort of next to the leg, on the inner part of the leg. It's not dead strong. It's only, that's the mix we've been using, the Bloomburn Sienna, and that's just a bit of wet Payne's Grey. And it just wants to be dropped in just to give a little bit more strength of shadow into the corner. Going down through there and just touch it in, especially into the corner underneath there. Just touch it in stronger. While it's wet, just let it bleed in. A few flicks out to the edge like that, leaving the odd patch of white. Like I said, you can actually scrape some of this if you wanted to get some texture and sense of air back in afterwards. Now we'll do this one. This one must be lighter. It's round there, so just wet your mix that you've just been using so it's more watery, and fetch that in through there. A bit more water still. You're going to drop some yellow ochre into this in there, and like I say, you've got the line. When you put the background in, you leave a bit of white on the outside edge of the leg. A few flicks into there, and that's sort of steeped in shadow coming round. So you're sort of coming round this outside edge here, down to the paw. A few flicks outwards, just little flicks with the brush to suggest tufts of hair and stuff. Fetch it down. You're going to lose that. That's going to get lost into the undergrowth. Now you can just drop a little bit more strength of Payne's Grey here and there, just a few flicks. Here and there like that. But now get a little bit of wet yellow ochre. So the yellow ochre you've just been using up there, just fairly wet. And drop that in wet into that back leg. So it creates a little bit of light, as though there's a little bit of light getting into that area under the leg. It's not just solid dark, so just drop that little bit of light into it. A little bit of ochre. Right, with a smaller brush, you can come round this tufts here with your grey, and where your lines were here, just sort of flick out with a few little bits of grey into the white, so you're just building up the sense of texture off the edges coming through. So just little flicks. So it's not just all pen and ink, you're just creating them little sense of colours into there like that. Right, we'll probably do a little bit more into here with browns once it's dry. It's still quite wet actually, that. Right, so what I'm going to do now, sorry, I've got somewhat underneath the paper. What I'm going to do now is the shoulder. And I've got to remember to move it down so that you can see it. So for the shoulder, we want it to feel as though it's a bit in the shade, but lighter just down it and even stronger there. So we're going to come down through here. Come with the yellow ochre. Come with your yellow ochre mix that you've been doing. got the top of the shoulder, take it down, water this right in, just fully wet above the ear. Remember there's a white patch on the ear, so leave that white patch alone. Water that in all the way down, just the same strength all the way down. You're going to drop in other colours, and that comes down through here above the ear. And just a few flicks here and there, just to suggest little bits of white tufts of fur into there. Now you've got some grey, so just get your grey again, just the grey you've been using on the leg, but more watery. Drop it in. Can you see it? It's not strong. It's just dropping in to give a little bit of shading onto the grey, onto the ochre, so the ochre isn't as bright. Odd little flick of tuft just here and there. Now give that a minute or two to dry, and then we'll put the shoulder in. So while that's drying, come round the back of the ear and do the same. Just a bit of wet yellow ochre, fairly pale, fairly wet. You'll darken these shoulders down in a minute, and just paint it loosely into the ear. This is one of these things where you'll have to scratch out the fine hairs on there, and fetch this round here. Now there's a tuft coming round here, so you're about here, and this line here wants to be left with a bit of white round the outside. So that black line there, try and leave some white just round the outside edge. Lightly tuck it into there, so it's just little gaps, so you're leaving little patches of white here and there, like that. Turn to your grey, and as you're coming down underneath, drop your grey in. This is blue and burnt sienna. Drop your grey in. Again, leaving a tuft just there. There's a tuft just there of white. And take that down to the edge of the mouth. This is where you'd have to put the whiskers in with gouache afterwards. Take that down the edge of the mouth like that. Carry on down with the grey. Take it through the pen and the ink, like that, down underneath, right up to where your whiskers are, and leave the white round the edge for the jawline, the mouth line, like that. And tease that into there. Like that, through there, just tease it in. Drop a little bit of wet yellow ochre coming down through here into it, so it sort of just blends together, and drop the same yellow ochre on the outside. You don't want any white round here. You'll probably put a slightly stronger shade in, so you don't want any white here. This is coming down to the front leg. Right, what you want to do now is drop some more grey. So I would get a little bit more strength of Payne's grey, and just in underneath that tuft there and the edges, just drop, while it's still wet, it's got to be done while it's wet, drop some wet Payne's grey in. Can you see? It's just dropping it in patches, giving that little bit of texture into there like that. It's even going to be even darker under there in a second or two. It's going to be darker still. But carry that grey down through there into that sort of angle there, like that. Put it down. Now you're going to leave white. There's a pencil line where I drew it in, which I don't think we need. We'll just leave some white when we paint the background in. So that wants to come down through an angle like that. Because that's just too far out, that. I'm going to leave that white there, so the sort of the patterns just going around the corner. So I'm going to leave a line of white there, which when you paint the background in, you'll leave. And that comes down to here like that. A few little streaks and a few little angles, I don't know if you can see them, just little shadows just coming down through here. Just here. Little tufts, just sort of, I'm just sort of dropping the brush in and leaving gaps for tufts of feathering down through there. Just dragging, it's virtually dry brush now. I'm just sort of dragging down. It doesn't want to be white, this, because it's in shadow a little bit. So what you want now is just a watery blue. It's the grey, but I've added a bit more French ultramarine to it, and it's watery, and it's coming down here. It looks darker, but it'll be stronger when you put the background in. And that comes down to here with just a few little flicks here and there. Just drag some odd flicks into these lines where the feathering is. And then you're going to go stronger and darker, so a bit more Payne's Grey, just a bit more stronger. And you're going to go underneath the jaw there, underneath the top of the mouth, while it's wet, and drop that in stronger. Goes round the pink of the mouth, into here. Wet it out a little bit, but leave some white on the outside edge, which is going to be the fine tufts. Drop some of the dark into this crease here, where the legs just sort of pulling forward. This leg's pulling forward here, like that, just into that crevice just there. And you can do the odd flick here and there, so you get variations in the colour. And now come down with your yellow ochre. So yellow and yellow ochre, come down the outside edge. Leave a little hint of white on the outside right of the leg. So you're just separating that from the back leg by just leaving that little hint of white, sort of fine hairs. Take that back up into that ochre colour, blend them in, wash them down, just still leaving that piece of white that's quite strong. You're going to make the paws stronger and darker afterwards. At the moment you're just sort of getting this blend in, so fill this in, and then we will drop stronger texture into that. Stronger darks into that afterwards. And while you're on there, a few flicks of the yellow ochre into the back leg there. Little flicks into there. Right, I'm going to allow that to dry, so I'm going to come up to here and carry on with the shoulder, what we were doing with the shoulder. So you want it stronger. So get your burnt sienna and French ultramarine, mix, add more burnt sienna into it, so it's more on the browner side. It wants to be warm, but it doesn't want to be bright. There you go, like that, sort of like that mix. And come over to your shoulder at the top of this shoulder here, and paint that in to get that sort of shadowy line around the outside edge, up to about there. Take it down towards the ear, tease it back, and as you tease it back, just a few flicks so that you're leaving some finer hairs, just sort of a sense of them coming up through there. Now before that dries, change to your yellow ochre and your yellow, and carry the mixture on back up just lighter than what it was by adding this yellow ochre in and the yellow in. So as you're taking it over the shoulder, you're just flicking in a few little random touches, just little flicks here and there in amongst your ink lines, just a few little flicks in amongst your ink lines. And if you notice, there's a sort of a muscle or part of a muscle just there, just a bit darker just there, into there, and a few little flicks either side of the ear, leaving that white patch. You can touch a little bit into the white patch on the inside edge because it's going to be white all the way around. And then just a little odd touch in the direction of the way the hairs are lying, back up. So you're just sort of pulling them back up and fetch them down into that ink line. Just touches down, one or two up there, fill the shoulder in. Drop a little bit more dark just behind the ear. So it's quite strong just behind the ear. Now what you can do, because this is dry, is get your yellow and yellow ochre, make it a bit stronger, add a bit more yellow ochre in, come over this area here and just pull in some stronger lines coming down into the shadow of the body, like the curve of the body down there. Just pull them down through there like that, lose them over the top into there, wet your brush, just tease it out either side with a damp brush so it just blends in. So go to the other side, tease it out with a damp brush, just sort of pushing it backwards like that, just a wet brush, just pushing it backwards. So it's a softer transition just about there. Back there. Drop a little bit more darker just down here, round the back end. Leave it lighter on the top because you want that feeling of sunlight on the top. But just darken it down into this area here. Just flick it out. And then again, just wet your brush and just tease it upwards. So it doesn't end as a hard edge. It's you're sort of blending it out and softening it so it's not a hard edged line down through there. I'll just touch into that. It'll probably run, but I'll just touch into that tail. Yeah, like that. Right, a little bit more watery Payne's grey and just come down from the ear outwards, from the edge of the ear outwards. Just tone it down with a little bit more watery Payne's grey, just flicking into the ear and teasing it outwards. So you're getting just a slight stronger shadow. In fact, it can be just a little bit stronger than what I've got it there. That's better. Just that little bit more strength. You can see it, and it sort of turns around following the ink lines and drops into here. So it just wants to be darker just up there. And you can drop it even darker. Get a little touch more Payne's grey. And just into the crux of the ear. Like that. And just let that tease out a little bit. Drop a little bit into the ink line. And then just a few little touches just under that tuft. Just a few little touches. It's still damp, but you can just put a few little extra flicks in to create that little bit more. Can you see them? Just very, very slightly. Nothing drastic about them or strong. Just a suggestion of hair, fur into there. And then we did darken that. I'm going to darken that just a bit more under that head there. Just darken that a little bit more and into there. Get a little bit of darken just from the top there, from that top, just flick a few little, sort of the yellow ochre, but add a little bit of the burnt sienna. Add a little bit of your yellow ochre mix, you can see that, into that burnt sienna blue mix. So just add a bit of that in, so you're lightening that up. And just put some darker flicks into here, just across the top of the head, leaving a little bit of white, and fetch that down through there, up into the ear. Up into the ear, and just sort of finish it about there, and then drop some yellow ochre and yellow into it while it's wet. Let that get stronger. Right, that's all right. And this down here I'm going to do after I've done the face, because if I wet this well, I won't actually, but no, I'll leave it for the moment, because if you're right-handed you'll be painting over top of yourself. Right, we're going to put the inner ear in. So just down here wants to be the yellow ochre mix. Just down that edge there. And try and leave just a little bit of white on the outside edge. Just try and leave a little bit of white and just fill it in a little bit into there, like that. Come down and just pull a little bit round here. Remember, there's a white tufts round there which will shape when we paint the background in. Drop that in. Now I think you can get a finer brush all round and get some of the Payne's grey and your grey mix. Drop that into your yellow ochre that you've just dropped into there. I'm just getting a bit more Payne's grey. It's all fairly wet. Drop that in there like that, so it's stronger there, and sort of paint down into the tufts of hair, leaving little fractures of fine hair just sticking up. Flick it out and just create some finer hairs with a brush. Come into the ear round the top with your Payne's grey, round the outside edge of the ear like that. So around that outside edge. Flick into the hairline, just dragging in that sort of direction. Wet in a bit more solid in a couple of spots. Again, this is where you'll probably need to use some gouache or a blade, and then just wet into that. It doesn't want to be bright white, so just get some clean water and just wet in where your greys were, and just sort of tone it down. You don't want a bright white on that ear. It just wants to be... It's red hot in here. Joan must have the heat on downstairs. Just darken that ear down. It doesn't want to be white. What it wants to be is just toned down, and you'll scrape some, or you'll paint some white bits into it. So tone the ear down so that you haven't got a lot of massive white. And then with a bit more burnt sienna, just drop that in the top edge there, underneath there, and drop it in here. Like that. just a couple of flicks, so you're just breaking it up. Right, we'll do the same. The other one's not too, they've got quite a bit of white, so just go around the top edge there with the wet Payne's grey and sort of paint an edge round for the ear and drag it inwards a little bit, just leaving a few little flicks of white. Just drag it inwards a little bit. And this is where it gets darker just there, because that's the back of the tiger behind the ear there, just that darker patch just there, like there. Flick that in, yellow ochre and yellow, and come down the inside edge. And remember, you've got a nice tuft of white coming around here. That's fine. Right, to get that tuft, we want to put some stronger burnt sienna blue in and join up from this line here, just above it, just flick above it, take it out to this line here. So take it out to there like that, quite dark, lift it up, take it down round this edge here, lift it out a fraction, but try and leave some of that white still through there, like that. Get your yellow and yellow ochre mix and lighten that upwards towards the ear, but don't reach it, so you leave that tuft of white hair, lighter hair just there. So lift that up towards it with the wetter yellow. But you leave that lighter tuft just along there. And yet with the wetter yellow, you can water just inside. Keep it pale though. Water just inside. Round there. Drop a little bit more yellow in, just a little bit. You want that white to be left alone. Right, with the yellow ochre, up through here. Paint into where you've left any white, into the edge there. Keep it lighter, fetch it through here. Keep it light and fetch it down through here. To the top of the darker line just there. And just tease it out with a few flicks at the edges. Drop some more. I'm just dropping it a little bit stronger. Still the yellow and the yellow ochre. Just dropping it a little bit stronger, just on the front there, like that. Allowing it to just be a bit darker coming down. And then just do the same on the other side. Get your burnt sienna. Come into this area here with your burnt sienna and blue. Paint into this line here. Again, taking it out, don't reach that outside edge, just leave it light just there for the moment. Make it just a little bit stronger, just touching into it here and there, like that. A few flicks down. Turn to your yellow ochre. Wet it up the top, taking it upwards, just leaving a little shimmer of white around the top edge. And a little shimmer of white down here. You can tone it down a little bit by just flicking into it round here. Like that. And you can flick outwards here into these hairs here. Remember, some of them are going to be white when you put the background in. Also come underneath with a few little flicks, fine flicks, just suggesting little touches of hairs in there around that patch. And take that down, that patch, just to the bottom. Take it inside the eye. Keep it watery here, just inside the eye, just like there on the outside edge of the eye. Keep it watery, very wet, just a few touches. And the same over here, just coming round this back part of the eye, keeping it watery, and just keep it wet all the time. Just dropping it in. Right, get your grey, your Payne's grey, fairly wet, and just above the eye, just put a few loose. I can't go in any closer for you, unless I move the camera down. Hang fire, I might shake the camera a bit, but I'll move the camera just a bit nearer. Is that better? Give it an hour to stop shaking. Right, so get your Payne's grey very wet. Take it into that grey there, down into just above the eye, and a few flicks so that it feels sunk in. It's not bright white, it wants to feel sunk in, just down there, and just going above the eye a little bit. Feel little flicks here and there with the grey now, just very wet though. Across the top of the eye, into the eye there. Now you want it stronger, add a bit more blue and burnt sienna. You want it stronger underneath the eye, because we inked it in, but we didn't make it a solid black line, if you remember, so that we could put this darker edge in. And it can be just a little bit stronger, but it doesn't want to be solid black. So just in that gap between the eyeball and the outside line, into there, you want this grey dropping in. Just into there like that. And you do the same on the other side. So just above the eye, just paint in some finer hairs for the eyebrow. Just sort of drag it in, creating that little bit of texture. Create a few little bits of texture coming round the outside edge, and a few little suggestions of shadow and shade into there. Make it stronger into that gap below the eye. Not that strong that it vanishes. It wants to be dark, but you want to be able to see it when it dries. And that comes into there and out. And a few little flicks out to suggest fine hairs to that edge. Run some burnt sienna into the one underneath and wet that out a bit stronger. So some burnt sienna, and do the same on the other side. Just from the outside line, just wet some burnt sienna out. Into there like that. I'm just going back up with a little touch of Payne's grey, a bit stronger, just to fix that little flick into there for the ear, just to make it look as though it is darker into that patch there, and darker underneath here in a couple of spots. Like I say, you can actually use a blade, and I'll show you afterwards, to scrape some fine hairs. A little bit more burnt sienna just into that part of the ear there. That's it. a little bit more into there, a little bit more burnt sienna yellow ochre into there, just where that tuft is, and into that tuft. Just needs to be, as it's drying palely, you just need to go back in and just make it that little bit more stronger feel of burnt sienna, etc. into there. Right, so you want some yellow ochre, and you're going to come down around the outside edge of the eye here, leaving just a little bit of white coming down there, and fill that in. I'll probably use a bigger brush. I've got too small of a brush there. Just fill that in using a bigger brush, a bit more, leaving like a sense of a white teardrop down. And you fill that in just down there, leaving a little bit of white underneath like that, and drop a little bit of burnt sienna wet into it and just let it bleed out, so it creates some different shades. Do the same on the other side. So coming from the outside edge here, some wet burnt sienna, teasing it out, again leaving a sort of a sense of a teardrop just there. Build it into there, tease it down to there, change to wet yellow ochre, drop that in, wetting that out. But you want to leave some little bits of white just here, just little touches, and just here, and that's going to come down to just above the whiskers there. And that's going to come down through there. I'll just fill that in. I'm going to put some more colour into that. Just fill that in for now so you can see that's coming down, leaving a white edge around the jaw there, like that. And that same colouring, wet yellow ochre, now wants to come down here, leaving the white on the edge of the eye, teasing it out. Down to where the whiskers start. Leave a little bit of light on the outside edge if you can, like that, right? And what I would do is just paint this in the same yellow ochre for the moment. Just paint it in down here. Teasing it in, like that. Now get the Payne's Grey. Just go above your nostril, leaving a little hint of light alone. So just go above your nostril there, leaving a little hint of white. Touch it in with the grey up the side. Like that. You can use a smaller brush now because you would. And with the grey, just tease back up in a few little patches like this. You're gonna drop colour into this, so you're just sort of starting to create a sense of shadow onto that. This is Payne's Grey, just wet, dropping it up into there, making it stronger even by dropping more Payne's Grey just above the white patch of the nose across there. A few flicks up there like that. And then you want wet, very wet yellow ochre, very watery, and run that in. It doesn't matter if you leave an odd patch of light, that's fine. Run that in. You're then going to just allow that to dry a little bit, and then you're going to put some dark into there. So you're going to allow that to dry a little bit and then put some dark in. Right, a little bit of wet Payne's Grey, fairly wet. Come underneath the nostrils and just tease a little bit of hairs out little bit of shadow out from under the nostril. From the whiskers, just go into the whiskers and do a few flicks through the whiskers. So you just create a little sense of shadow. This doesn't want to be bright white under the whiskers. It wants to be just sort of flicked through. You might have to darken behind afterwards. Just a little flick of hairs through. Into there. Do the same on the left hand side. Come out from underneath the dark. A few little tufts, sort of aiming towards the whiskers. Round underneath. A few little tufts in there. Don't leave this all white. It wants to be toned down. And with the same grey while you're on, come up here and just flick some greys very wet in amongst the whites, and just tone them down. Just a few flicks, just very wet through there, and then as you're getting down to the jawline, just a little bit stronger into there. Right, what you can do now is just get a Payne's Grey a little bit stronger, a little bit more strength onto it, and just underneath there, underneath the top jaw, just wet in and darken down. Take it round the line and wet it out a little bit. And the same on this side. Go into where you've done the ink and left some patches, and just tease it out. Just a sense of tufts. Run the Payne's Grey wet into the bottom lip, so it's not bright white, and leave a little touch of light on that far side, but just tone that down. And you probably drop a little bit blue and burnt sienna into that, so it's just a bit stronger. We didn't put it just as a black line because I thought it would be too strong. So just drop some strong blue burnt sienna into that gap underneath the teeth. And out. Bit more burnt sienna to the mix and darken into the mouth. You can even drop a little bit, not much, of cadmium red, but very, very weak. Don't make it too strong. A little bit of cadmium red wet into the mouth. Above the teeth like that. I've got to let that dry a little bit. Just that flick round the teeth. Got to let that dry a little bit. And then we'll come back to that. Right, you want some, while you're on with the cadmium red, you might as well put a little bit of pink into the nostrils. Paint it stronger, like that, on the bottom half and through the middle. So paint it stronger. Wet your brush and water it out upwards. But stronger on the bottom where it's sort of turning underneath. Right, do the eyes. We'll do the eyes, then we'll darken the nose and the features down. So for the eyes, you're going to need to sort of get this sort of sense of light. There's a little bit of light around the outside edge. If you can leave that white, we can also touch it down, and there's a little bit of light on that side. So what you want to do you want them to be sort of a greeny feel, but what I will do is get burnt sienna and blue again. Just get the burnt sienna and blue, but a little bit more burnt sienna in. A bit more burnt sienna into the mix. Like that, right? Have some yellow, cadmium yellow wet, separate. See what this does. Start with your dark, your burnt sienna blue. Go into the eye, round the outside edges of the eyeball. Just sort of paint into the outside edges of the eyeball, across the top, round the inner part and underneath. Do the same on the other side, across the top, round the inner part and underneath, like that. And on that one you've got a brown at that side, right? Get your yellow before anything dries, just wet. And wet into it, leaving a little bit of white on that far outside edge. And wet the yellow in. And wet the yellow into this, leaving a line down the outside edge on there, like that. So you're leaving some light catching that eye there. Now wet your brush. Just clean water, drop it in. Wet your brush, clean water, drop it in. And it should push the darks back to the outside edges, the water dropping in, like that. And then we can tidy the edges up afterwards. Now we need this to be the strongest. So I'm going to pick a brush, and we want some burnt sienna. You want your blue, but have more burnt sienna in. So I've added a lot more burnt sienna into the blue and burnt sienna. And I'm just going to go round here with this, putting it in the shadowy corners. Just put it in quite broken for the moment, like that. Wet your brush, get your yellow ochre and yellow stronger, and wet into that. Wet into that. Dry your brush off and just tease it upwards in patches, leaving little bits of light, and blend it into the top part of the nostril, like that. A few flicks coming down. Get your dark again, your burnt sienna a bit stronger. Come down this right hand side. Not as strong on this side, it's got a bit of light to it. It wants to be stronger on this side. So from the eye down into the nostrils, lifted up a little bit in patches, teased outwards, a little bit teased outwards, a bit more stronger into the patches round the eye, round the bottom of the nose into where the whiskers are. Wet your brush, get your yellow ochre, float that in round there, tease it in, float it in there. Loosen this, because this doesn't want to be strong, so just get your wet yellow ochre and just tease it in a little bit. A few little flicks coming down. And then you want your grey again. Just get your sort of your grey and just patch in to the nose by just dabbing into it and patch in, making it a lot stronger and filled in. at the nose above the pink. So just above the pink, make it a lot stronger. It wants to be darker onto the shadow side, so that side wants to be darkened down over there, like that. Just going to make the nose just a bit more red into the nostrils, like that. Right, a little bit of yellow ochre, wet, and just paint into the teeth, into the shadow side and across, into the shadow side. Wet your brush so it's not full of colour, and just float water into the rest of the tooth and drop it into them teeth. You don't want the teeth to be bright white, like that. A little bit of Payne's grey, and you're just going to touch underneath here and just create this. I'm going to go in there and just make that a bit stronger, that patch just underneath the mouth. So I'm just getting a bit more Payne's grey into that because it's just a bit lighter than what I want. Curve that round, and then a few stubs out, and change to a smaller brush with the Payne's grey. A few stubs outwards, just little flicks out. You're going to allow them to dry a little bit, and then you're going to wet into that. So just little flicks outwards. Go underneath that jawline, so leave the light, go underneath it and do some flicks in there, leaving some white lines showing. And that flicks sort of round there up to there. And then with a slightly bigger brush and a wet Payne's grey, water that out. Water that out. Water the grey coming round from there, like that, just into that patch there, because it's there, but it doesn't want to be inked in. So we just left that and just suggested it. And then get a wet yellow ochre, just a wet yellow ochre, and float that in to them hairs into there, just keeping it wet and just teasing it back, leaving an odd gap here and there. Drop a bit more Payne's grey in the bottom underneath the tuft of jawline, like that. Do the same round here then. Come round this outside edge and just flick into this patch here, leaving a little flick of jawline underneath. You're going to put some colour into this down here, and then with a bit of water just float into that where you sort of tufted it, just float into it, creating a shadow and leaving the white clear underneath. So you're leaving, just drop a bit more in, so you're just leaving a tuft of white just underneath there. And what you need to do is just come under this here and wet this down with a grey. Just leaving a little bit of white. Just some little flicks here and there, but tease that out. Drop a bit more grey in underneath. It wants to be stronger, just in the shadow. So just a bit more Payne's grey just dropped in from underneath the ink that you did. Just drop a little bit more wet Payne's grey in. Through there and into there, and then just water that upwards and down there like that. That's looking all right. Just going to run a little bit of very watery yellow into the nostril, into the top of the nose, just to take the stubs out a little bit so they're not too prominent. Just into there a little bit. And also, while you're up there now, you should be able to get a yellow ochre, the same colour you've just done into there. Quite strong. That's it there. Go into the eye, and just round the eyeball, just drop some more strength in. You can darken the eyeball afterwards with a bit of pink afterwards. So just into the eyeball, just drop a little bit more strength into there. You won't leave that bright white. When that's dry, you'll just run a fraction in, otherwise it'll be too bright, that. Right, we need to darken down underneath this, underneath here. We need this to be stronger. So that the head looks as though it's coming forward away from it. So I'm just strengthening this up a little bit more. Into there as well. And it's still wet, so it's just sort of blending in like that. Right, so we'll come down here and we'll do this leg, and then we'll do that. Tell you what, while you're on with the grey down here, just a bit more watery grey, and just flick this down into this sort of area here. Just watery Payne's grey, and just flick it down in little streaks. You're going to put a colour on the outside edge, just a little sort of sense of streaks down there, like that. Taking it out to where the foot is. Right, so this leg here wants to be strong and dark. It's turning underneath. So you get your burnt sienna mix that you used on this area here. Get your burnt sienna mix. Come from about there and drop some strong flicks in, like that. Don't worry about them. Leave a gap, drop a few strong flicks in there. Fill it in a little bit round here. This is burnt sienna. There's a hint of blue in, but it's mainly burnt sienna. You've got to do this quickly so it doesn't dry on you in this shape. And take this underneath. Little flick just up there. Remember, there's a bit of white needs to be left on the padding. Right, don't let that dry. Get your yellow ochre. Drop that in. Let that bleed together. A few flicks through into here. Teasing it up round the outside edge, up here. Still trying to leave a little sense of white if you can. Into there. Tease it back up with the wet yellow, up through here, and just the odd little flick of colour, and blend that into this so it just sort of bleeds into it. A few little flicks up and out. Drop some water in the top so it just lightens it up, and the water will run down and push the dark down here, down to here. Get a wet grey, a wet Payne's grey, and come round the inside of the foot with the wet grey and just do a few sort of streaks into there as well. And then mix a strong burnt sienna and blue. Strong burnt sienna and blue, so it's a lot darker. Drop that in the bottom in patches while it's wet. Just a few like shadowy flicks here and there, just creating a sense of texture and fur into there like that. Right, come to this leg here with the wet yellow ochre. Come round the outside edge of that there, that line there. Tease it up, leaving a little bit of white there, and just sort of tease it in and lose it just about there, and sort of flick it out gently down there, and then pull this all the way down, starting from there, and just flicks so you get some white coming through. Just flicks there. Fill this in all the way down with just the wet yellow and yellow ochre. Just fill it all the way down. Like that. Wet it in. Flick it out. Water your brush and just drop water in on these edges a little bit. Just drop water in round here. Like that. Dry your brush off and just tease it back a fraction. So you're just pulling some of the colour out a little bit round that edge there. So you're just drying your brush off and pulling some colour out round there. A little bit of burnt sienna blue, and just create a few more slightly darker flicks into the centre area where it's turning. A little bit of watery grey, Payne's grey, back down here. Just flicks like that. Darken that just a little bit more. And then for the foot, we can't really see the foot, but it would be like that. It would be padded, just coming over the top like that, down to the bottom area. So it would be padded down there, and probably the grey will continue down just above it. It's in shadow, so it's not going to be bright white. So just sort of tease that down to the foot, to where the foot's going to be, and then drop some stronger burnt sienna blue on the bottom sort of parts where you've already done some inking. Just drop some blue into there. Get a little bit of yellow ochre and just put a little sense more of texture. Too strong, that. Just wet it out. A little bit more sense of texture into that foot that's coming forward. That's one of the back legs coming forward, like that. Right, looking all right. With a fine brush, get some Payne's grey, and just go to the tail and just put in, darken just down behind the back of the tiger's backside. And just darken that, and put one or two little flicks. It's just going to be slightly stronger than what you had in, just one or two slighter, lighter, darker, thinner flicks of Payne's grey here and there just to create some tufts of hairs. Make sure you darken into the ink lines where you've left the gap. And do a little bit more darker just into the crux of the leg. Like that. Notice how we left just a little white shimmer of a line down there. So you can wet into this leg and just do the odd flick to suggest shadowy little bits of hairs here and there in shadow. Just the odd flick into them. And into here. And through there. Right. I think I need a little bit more warmth just behind the ear. And into there. And some little flicks of grey. I'm using Payne's grey, but just creating some flicks of hairs out, because you'll use some white afterwards. And creating some flicks of grey coming around the head. It looks strong, but it's wet, so it'll just pale out a little bit. And you can get a strong Payne's grey with a fine brush if you want, or you can leave it till it's dry and use a pen and just ink the dark patch of the eye back in. So you give it some strength. Now, you don't want that to be bright white, but you've got to be careful. I'm just going to run watery yellow, but very watery, hopefully, in. Just sort of one stroke, 2 strokes, 3 strokes, just so it's not bright white at that point. And you can dip your brush, if you want, a fine brush, into yellow, just yellow paint. Not you don't want wet. You just want to dip your brush into the pan of paint or tube if you've got the tube. Just pick up some yellow on the end of your brush and just create a few dots of yellow just under the eyeball. Can you see them? Just very minute, just into where that light patch is, just underneath the eyeball. Just lighten that up with a few dots of yellow, like that. I think I'll darken down with some burnt sienna and yellow this side just a little bit stronger. Just a few flicks into there and just make this just that little bit strong. I'm using basically yellow and yellow ochre over the top just to get it warmer and yellower, but just that bit stronger than it is on that side. That's fine. A few little flicks of wet yellow ochre and just go into the back here and just do, I want it to be paler than that, just damp brush and just suggest a few little finer tufts. Can you see it? It's nothing. It's just a few little finer flicks to suggest a little bit more texture coming out from the darker lines. Sort of under the pen work that you did, just pull some lines outwards So just under the penwork. Can you see just a little bit of soft shading into the penworks? So it doesn't look like just black then white or whatever into there. So just little touches, just adding to the sense of fur. So coming out from the black, just touching inwards. A few little bits going over the top. This is just wet yellow ochre. You can even join one or two through. Don't. Well, it doesn't matter, but you don't want to do too much of that. Just pulling a few little bits of colour into the shadowy parts of the haunches. You can leave it lighter on the top as it's going over, but it's just into these patches here. Just a few little subtle shaded textures, just yellow and yellow ochre just going over the top, just to emphasize that darker part of the haunch, of the back of the shoulder coming in. And you can do the same on here, just a bit warmer. We put it into shadow, but you can just make it a bit warmer. And I think I might just sort of touch in a little bit so that it's not too uniform. It might look just a bit too straight, that, so I'm just going to blend a little bit back inwards a bit so it's not so straight, and a few flicks out. So it's all about flicks, loose flicks. We've done enough loose flicks in our time. Into there. And I think that's all right. I'm just exaggerating the sort of more shadowy area where the sort of the stripes and the fur is closer together in the angle you're looking at, so it looks darker. I think that's about right. Right. A little bit of grey just pulled out there so it's not too bright. Into there. Right. What we're going to do now then is paint in the background, hopefully, and make it stronger. A strong background will show this off. So you want a bigger brush because you want to be able to cover the paper. I'm going to zoom out for this. And like I say, can you see I've got a fine pencil line, which is sort of where I think the mount will go. So as long as I paint outside of that, I don't have to paint right to the edge. And then we're going to put some foreground in. And we've got to paint in between here. But we can go around the outside edge. Now this is going to have to be strong and dark, and you're going to have to sort of drop the colours in, right? So you're going to have to be quick on this, really. So you want a biggish brush that you can cover quickly. And I would just get your same colours, but just add more to them. So to get a nice, rich, dark, you want plenty of French ultramarine. Plenty of French ultramarine. You want some crimson in, because we're going to make this look darker. So get some crimson in and some burnt sienna. The way to get rich darks is them three colours: burnt sienna, crimson, and French ultramarine. gives you some really rich darks. If you can't get it strong enough, you can add some other Payne's grains, but you don't want it to be black. You want a warmth to this, and you're going to drop yellows in here and there. So you need to know you've got enough mix to go through. If you run out, just dip into the blue, then dip into the brown, then dip into the crimson, so you get a variation. But you also want, and I'll get another brush so don't waste that colour, you also want some yellows and greens together. Now you can use the same ochre colour you've been using, that way you keep a sort of a uniform. Add some yellow into it. Like that. Add some yellow separate. And drop a little bit of French ultramarine into that one. I've got two brushes, one to do the dark wash and one to drop in. So you're going to have to paint round this tiger with the dark wash and leave the shape and then paint out. Now, I don't know about you, but my easiest way would be for me to turn this round and paint away from it. So I'm going to start round where I'll tell you what, I'll start here because I can paint out and I'll come round. See, I've already started. Right, so I'll start outside the line, round the tail, round the outside edge of the tiger, fill it out past your line, fetch it round, keep filling it out, don't leave it to dry hard line on you, fetch it round the top of the tiger, drag it outwards, always drag it out, just keep moving it along this paint. Now, get a little bit of your greenery colour, make sure it's on the stronger side though, it doesn't want to be too wet, and just drop some patches in here and there. Keep it moving, don't allow it to dry. Keep it moving. Right, you can turn it round. Drop the brush, but that doesn't matter. Turn it round and continue on. Now what I would do, start the dark off. Start the dark off. Paint over the shoulder. Change the brush and change to the yellow one and continue the wash like that. So you're varying the wash. A bit more yellow here and there. Sort of dry brush that, just putting that yellow in. Round the outside edge of the ear. If you see it drying out on you, just darken it down. Go back to your dark colour, add that in. Fetch that round. Leave a little bit of light if you can, just on the edge of the ear, just a little fracture of light on there. Don't allow it to dry up there. Fill that in stronger. I'm running out of colour, which I knew I would do. Change to your yellow, green. Paint that in. Paint it into the dark. Now this is where you've got a white tuft. So just come down the outside edge like that, leaving a little white tuft round the ear. Can you see? Just round there. Change to your dark brush. I'm going to have to mix some paint quickly, so French ultramarine, crimson, burnt sienna, quite quickly. Paint into that. And here you've got tufts, so as you're going into here like this, just go up to the edge and just do a few flicks and leave a tuft of white round the outside edge. I shouldn't slow down, because if I do, can you see there, just leaving that tuft of white? Keep filling it in. And you keep the dark going around so that you can leave that tuft of white all the way down this outside edge. Fill it back in. Drop some yellow in. Back to your dark. Fetch your dark down, leaving a little hint of light around the outside of that yellow ochre. But don't go all the way down and allow it to dry. Just keep fetching it down like this. Blend this in a bit so that it doesn't go too patchy, so just work back in. Your brush wants to be on the drier side, like, and be careful that you don't sort of put too much wet into it and lose it a bit. Right, I'm going to darken this down. I'm going to add some Payne's Grey into this mix and darken it down stronger around the back of the leg. And as I'm getting down to here, I'm just going to fetch it closer into the tiger's leg and down. And this is stronger Payne's Grey added into this mix. Now if you want to create a little bit of sense of foliage and twigs down here, just get it to where you want it, and then with the side of the brush just drag. You can make it darker on the leg and round the top of the foot, but just like that, flick down, and you run some colour into that afterwards. So just a few flicks down, leaving some patches of light showing like that. Right, come back up to the lion's tail with your same colouring, blue, crimson, more blue, bit of burnt sienna, and come under the tail. Whoops, flicked into it there. Into the tiger. A little bit of greenery in. Round the back leg. And leave some light there, just there. So leave some light there, as though it's catching the light. Drag it down there like that, round the back of the leg, and then the same principle, just a few flicks. You can even leave them dots like that, because you can run some little bits of colour into them to suggest bits of greenery, flowers, undergrowth, leaves, etc. into there like that. Get a smaller brush, because you need to go in between the legs. Get a smaller brush with the same sort of colouring and go inside that leg. And again, if you can leave just a little hint of white on the outside edge, paint that down. And then just flick it out again like that. You now need to go on the inside of the legs. This is the chin and this is the light underneath, so just leave the light underneath. You can flick out some bits of colour with gouache or a blade. Leave white on the outside edge like that. I'm going to tone that down a bit with a bit of yellow, otherwise it'll be too dark compared to the rest. Leaving just a little hint of light on the outside of the legs. Do a bit of light, so it's just catching the light in places. You can leave a fraction on the underneath of the pad as well. And then just a few flicks like that. Right, you can go into the ground. I'm just going to zoom out. I zoomed in for you for some reason. I'm just going to zoom out. Whoop. Like that, and I'm going to put the ground in. So you want this, you can make it dark from the bottom, so you can use the same dark colours, a bit of Payne's grey or something like that, or just mix it into it. Use the same dark, go along the bottom area, so you're making sure you go outside of your dark lines, so you know where your mount can come up to. Right, dry brush, get a little bit of burnt sienna and just dry brush and just flick some. It's not dry brush, it's wet, but it's just flicks here and there. And it blend in. Get some yellow. You don't want any white showing into this, so just get some yellow, paint around the bulk of it while it's wet. Get a smaller brush and just create some flicks into it. You can leave that to, it should be all right actually, as long as you don't put water in and just get some colour from the pan and don't sort of use a lot of water Otherwise, if you use a lot of water, it'll cause a cabbage. Well, it might be walking through cabbages. I don't know. So just these little flicks in. I'll use a bigger brush. That's too small, messing around. It's better. Lose the white. You don't want a distraction of white edges, so just lose the white and blur the colour in here and there. And just a few flicks upwards into that paw. And some flicks upwards onto here. I'm trying to not wet it too much so that it doesn't run into the rest of the wash and make it a cauliflower. Just get it toned down. And then with a sort of a fine brush, I've got a really fine one here. Can you see it's long and fine? Just get some yellows first of all, watery, and flick upwards into the tiger's feet. Can you see? So you're just sort of creating some texture into them. So the grasses are sort of in front of him. Break the line up. And you can put some darker ones in with a little bit of Payne's Grey added in. So it's not, so it looks as though it's coming through the undergrowth a bit. So I've got Payne's Grey with yellow in and just creating some texture. If you've got a rigger, that's the same sort of thing. If you've got a rigger brush, and then you want some Payne's Grey with the same brush, but just dryish, and just do some flicks through this undergrowth while it's still damp, so it just blurs a little bit, crisscrossing some little bits of grasses. Into there like that, and then just get a bigger brush again, and just with a Payne's Grey wet, just wet into the bottom, along the bottom of the edge like that. And then with a slightly bigger brush, a slightly smaller brush, but not the thin one, just sort of break it up and tease it upwards. You don't want this to be too bright down here. You just don't want this distraction. Even a bit of dry brush there just breaks that up. My colour's drying out, so I'm just sort of a dry brush effect. You've got to break it up so it's not a solid line going along the bottom. Like I say, you can if you wanted afterwards, you could get some pen when it's dry and add a few little stalks and leaves with a bit of pen if you want. But what I'm going to do now is put the whiskers in if I can. I feel I need to tone a little bit down here, a little bit more colour into there, into where that stripe area is there, and even a little bit more just dropped into the bottom of the paw, and then just water it out so that it just blends. That's it. Now whiskers, you want some Liquitex, some gouache. I've got some in here somewhere, there we go. And you want a fine brush. It's not easy to paint over with these things. If you've got a pen, sometimes you can do it. You know, these acrylic pens that come in white, but it's not that easy to do. So it doesn't want to be dead thick, otherwise it'll just drag. Some water, wet it out. Just get it on the point of your brush. You can wait till this is all dry if you want, because it might be slightly damp here. Just on the point. Put a little bit more white on the outside edge of that jawline. Just there. And then paint a whisker out. A little more light on the edge of that tooth. I'm resting on wet paint here and there. And you want a little bit coming out from underneath the chin. Now you can scratch this. What time is it? Yeah, I've got time scratching. You can scratch this. Oh, I'll tell you where we wanted some white on the ears, didn't we? Right. If Just clean that brush. Always make sure you get rid of the acrylic off your brushes. If you can scratch it out. I mean, that's wet, so I can't scratch that now. But you can scratch little parts in the fur just to create some texture. So, like, see the darker bits there? You can just, with the sharp of the blade, just pick some lights out. Can you see them just sort of appearing, just even through the dark lines, just scraping a few little bits of texture out. You've got to be dry when you do this. It's got to be dry, which I think it is. And you can scrape whiskers. And you see, you can just flick some whiskers out a bit stronger. A little bit of scratches into there. But I think basically keeping the brush flat on the front paw, keeping the brush flat and just dragging it over so it just breaks, can you see, just breaks the texture up a little bit. You keep the brush sort of flat and not a point. But where you want the whiskers out, the blade's probably better than the paint. I'm just trying to see if there's anything I just need to do with it. I think it's all right. A little bit more yellow just down in that eye there, and a little bit darker just into the corners of the eye. A bit of cadmium yellow or yellow ochre, just a bit of burnt sienna just into the corners so that you get a sense of the eyeball curving inwards. Do you know what I mean? So it's not just a flat orb, it's curving inwards. But I think, to be quite honest, that's probably it. You can carry on and you can work on it. I think you could create a little bit more watery grey shadow under there, under the mouth, so that it pushes the jawline forward. So darken that down just a little bit more into there like that. But to be quite honest, I think that's about it. A little bit of dry brush work. Yep, I think that's about it. I'll hold it up for you. There you go. So the mount will go around that, and then the frame. I think that's all right, actually. I don't know what you think, but I think it's all right. So we shall leave it at that. I'll send it up to you. You'll get it later on this evening, and you can see how it goes. But I think it's looking all right. I think it's come out quite canny. It could actually make it slightly darker, the tiger. I don't know. It seems to be a lot more white there. So I'm just going to, I know I shouldn't, I'm just going to glaze a little bit of burnt sienna yellow ochre. I don't know whether I'm doing right here, but you don't have to do it. Nothing heavy, just wet. And I'm just going to glaze a little bit into the body, into there. Can you see? Just into them areas there. It's very wet, and it's just a glaze turning it darker into the shoulder type thing, into the haunches and stuff around there. Just a little glazed suggestion. Just gives it a bit more shadow in that back area. So that's just a wet yellow ochre burnt sienna, very, very wet. Just coming around this bottom half here, into that leg. and into that paw. But I think, to be quite honest, you could go on forever. Right, there you go. Door. Good, I'm glad you enjoyed doing it, Door. Lots more twiddling to be done. Yeah, Ken, you pleased with yours? Good, good. That's what I like to hear. The background's always difficult to paint in watercolours, to get dark and to keep it dark and strong. It's obviously turning paler now, but I wouldn't suggest, I mean you can, but I'd be careful if you wanted to put another wash over it to darken it down. You'd have to make sure that it was totally dry before you thought about doing that. And like I said, you can use some ink if you want and put a few stalks in. I'm just going to put quickly a couple of stalks in with a thin brush and a little bit of Payne's Grey. Just a little flick here and there, just to create a sense of padding around in it. I don't want to get too involved with it. It's the tiger that's the focus more than anything. That'll do. I can't carry on like that. Brian, excellent picture. Really happy with yours. Good. Everybody's happy with the picture. That's fine. I've just sort of put a bit more sense of colour and shadow into that back part there with a glazing wash of burnt sienna. But I think that's fine. And it was, like I said, as well as scratching out there, you can scratch out fine hairs from the ears as well. I'm leaving it. Right, folks, that's it. One tiger. Tomorrow, I'll be doing some Chinese painting in the morning. Some Chinese flowers and birds, so somewhat different. Right, okay. I'll talk to you tomorrow morning, and those of you who I don't see, I'll see you next Wednesday. But tomorrow, Chinese stuff. Right. Good night. I'll get this sent straight up for you, and I'll put the location onto my Facebook so that people can find it. Good night.